Hello, welcome back to the Blunicorn build. My name is Humble, and you join us on a day where things happen so quickly, I forgot to turn the camera on. So as you can see, we have the chassis flipped back over, and I said that we were going to do a little sound test comparison. Well, here you go. These are the main floor pans. And then the larger of the aluminum. Then we'll come over and do the passenger side. So it still rings. It still rings a little bit, but it's not nearly as bad as it used to be, and it's still curing. So where we left off was I was applying the underside of the car, and I was trying to do 2 thick coats with about 40 minutes, 50 minutes of flash time between them, and it turns out that wasn't long enough, and it needed to sit even longer. And so I done 2 coats very quickly the first night. Actually, I did the etching primer, and then I did 2 coats of the second skin Spectrum, just really thick, brushed it on with a paintbrush, and turns out it was so thick it didn't fully cure or dry, at least for a good day. And then I came back and I did a really thick 3 coats, and that took, I would say, a full 2 days, almost 2.5 days to cure, and I don't even think it's cured yet. The way that panel sounds when you knock on it, it seems like it's still curing. So I think it's good as it sits, and I'll keep testing it as I build the car. And if it still needs some more, well, we have the second skin Amplifier Pro that I'll put on the floor pan itself. So there we go. So I'll just put that on the floor pan, and that'll just be, additional sound deadening and additional protection under the seats, and that should be more than enough with the Spectrum and the Amplifier Pro, at least for this car. So now we can start bolting stuff on. You can see we have the naked chassis. There's technically 2 more panels left over there. There's this floor double skin, and there's this engine side of the rear bulkhead panel. The bulkhead panel's done. All I need to do is cut up some insulation to stuff in there, but I don't have any adhesive, and I forgot to grab some. So I need to get some contact adhesive, just like spray on 3M stuff, nothing too crazy. And then once I get that on, apply the extra insulation. It's a second skin heat barrier, which will go in there just fine, and provide both additional heat protection from nothing in those panels, and a minor amount of sound absorption, because between your back and the front of the engine, there's about 5 or 6 inches. So you need all the additional heat insulation and sound insulation that you can get back there to help make the cabin more livable for any trip longer than, say, 15 minutes. So for now, I think I'm going to start bolting on the suspension arms, because it's easy and quick, and it'll start to look like a car a little bit quicker that way. So stay tuned, and we'll start putting these parts on.
Discovery.
And we're back to another day after doing the A-arms yesterday. Fast forward a day, and now we're back on the weekend, and we're doing a few things to the car. So my friend Sean is here helping me. Say hello, Sean.
Hello, Sean.
And right now you can see in his hand he's actually working on templates for insulation for the rear bulkhead. And we'll just show you that really quick. So that insulation is going to go right there between the two rear bulkhead panels, and it's over here on the floor. And this stuff is another second skin product. This is the heat shield or heat barrier that they have. And it's pretty lightweight. We're just going to put it in there. It's not adhesive backed, so we have to use some 3M adhesive to bond it into place. And then while he's working on that, I will be working on up front the steering rack, the steering column, and then here's the accessories for the steering rack to put it in place. So the mounts, the boots, the end links, and so on. And that's what we're working on so far. That should all go pretty quick, so I'm certain there will be more following that. All right, so here we are. Sean's going to use the template that he made for the rear bulkhead panel, and we're just going to mark it out on this second skin heat wave.
Doesn't need to be super precise.
And this insulation is relatively easy to trim. I mean, you can trim it with scissors, but if you have shop shears or something a little more aggressive, that would be even better. Alright, that's one done, and then what we're going to do is we've done the one side already, so Sean can just pop that triangle of insulation into place.
May need a little trim.
And just like that. And I thought we were going to need adhesive for these, but with 2 layers of this insulation between these 2 panels, it's a tight enough fit that I don't think we actually need any contact adhesive for this whatsoever. So we may just run without it. And that's pretty much how the insulation for the rear bulkhead panel goes. All right, and here's my progress on the steering rack. So you can see the rack itself is loosely mounted because I haven't set the side-to-side location yet. I don't even know if this angle for the input shaft is correct. I still have to put in the steering shaft and then all the way up here into the interior of the car. And then also the bushings need to be mounted here. But the rack mounts very simply. You have these kind of mounting blocks that bolt through the chassis, and you can sort of see it in there. There is a lock nut and a washer. You have to be very careful not to lose your socket in the hole, or the washer for that matter, and I had to tape it to the socket in order to get it to stay put without fear of dropping it. But the hole for this is so spot on that even putting a little bit of extra tape on the socket made the socket difficult to pull out, and I nearly lost the socket inside the frame, and that's the last thing you want rattling around in the frame every time you make a turn. So I'm glad we kept it out. So currently I have these boots and the rod ends to go on, and these are the bushings for the column, and I'm going to get those on and in place, and I guess we'll find out if I put that column hole in the correct location. Alright, so here we are. The rack is now pretty much fitted, waiting for final torque. Same with the steering shaft. These bushings for the steering column were a real pain in the ass to get pressed in here, and you can see where some of the bushing material didn't quite get in. But otherwise, this section still needs to come out for a little bit of cleanup to make turning this thing a little bit easier, because it's a little tight in the bushing area. But the steering rack itself is set. The boots are on. We have the tie rod ends on. So steering is more or less ready to go. And now here in the back, we're getting ready to do the final application of sealant and rivet the exterior rear bulkhead. And you can see all of the insulation is now set in there. We have these firewall grommets, which will seal perfectly with the e-brake cables and the shifter cables. And then this panel itself is ready to go. So that's what we're going to fit next. We finished with the rear panel. At some point the camera died, so I'm not sure how much of this I got, but the engine bulkhead panel is in and cleaned up a little bit. Not too worried about the surface, because it's going to be covered in a heat protective foil anyway. But our grommets are through, the panel itself is done, and you can hear just how non-resonant that is, which is great, because that's one of two panels that helps set you away from the engine bay. So that is perfect. Up next, since we're done with the rear panel and we're done with the steering for the moment, right here hanging on the wall are the coolant pipes that run down the sides of the chassis down here, and we're going to wrap those with some exhaust wrap. And the reason you do that is not because they're high temperature, but it helps keep any kind of heat out of the cabin, and any heat we can keep out of the cabin is good. So that's one of the next steps, and then doing this second to last panel, getting this trimmed and fit, and that is the footwell area floor double skin, and we'll get to that next. And we're going. All right, so the first step here is we've had the wrap soaking, which helps reduce the fiberglass dust that the wrap will kick up. And now Sean is fastening the first tie wrap. I suppose we need something to cut that with, don't we?
Yeah, we do. You might want to pause. Oh,
Sure. Perfect.
whatever.
All right, so we get the excess trimmed off, and now what you do is you fold the wrap over the edge, and you can actually spin the tube.
That's what I'm working on it here. Come on, man, give me a break. I'm just trying.
And then he's going to work his way down the coolant pipe, overlapping the wrap as he goes.
How much am I overwrapping?
About
About a quarter.
quarter of the wrap or so. Mainly because I'm afraid that we don't have enough wrap to get down the whole length of the coolant pipe, as you can see. But he's going to continue on that while I work inside. Let's go inside here. Also, apologies for the camera change and the wobbliness. This is all on my phone. So I've trimmed the panel now, and I've trimmed the edges. So what I need to do is bend this flange down and get it ready to drop in the footwell there. So that's what I'm working on. There we are, one coolant tube down and one to go. What would you say? We went through maybe half of half of 150-foot roll. So if you plan on undertaking this project, 150-foot roll of exhaust wrap will probably cut it. But he's going to work on the second one, and then I'll show you my progress. Currently, I'm working on this floor panel and bending up the return. I have this side and this side to go yet, but so far so good. I didn't film any of the steps because it was a lot of the same stuff that you've already seen. So we have this main floor double skin now in the car. It's sealed and riveted, and I have the battery sitting here because there's a section that I'll show you from here and then along this wall underneath the battery, which is just held to the floor with sealant. Same with this. There are rivets here, but it's just an aluminum square tube that is bonded to the panel below it. We also put sound deadening on the back side of this panel along with some of the heat shield insulation, and you can hear just how dead that panel is. So the interior should be nice and quiet. We did have one gotcha. Can't really see it from there, but right there in the middle of the panel, we had to drill out a bunch of rivets because over there in the corner where those tubes meet, it turns out we didn't clearance one of the square tubes enough, and it was hanging up, so we had to pull this panel out, but we had already applied sealant and everything, and well, it made a mess everywhere. But like anything else, nothing is permanent, and so we were able to drill out the rivets, re-drill the holes, correct the square tube by taking off an inch on the end of it, and get the panel back into the car before any of the sealant cured. And well, here's the end result. Is everything's in the car and finally ready. And I showed you the rear panel before, and all that sealant is cured, and that's ready to go. The coolant tubes are here temporarily on the car. The wrap is still a little damp, but otherwise it's ready. These are the P-clips that are used to mount it. I'll deal with those in a little bit once we get some of the brake lines run, but that's for another day. So for now, I think that's everything we'd done. That panel was quite a bit of work because it went from a base blank panel to a fully installed piece in one afternoon. So I'll take that like it is. So with that said, that's the end of the night. My name is Humble, and this is the Blunicorn Ultima Evolution build. Stay tuned for the next episode where we're going to work on the brake systems. We'll probably put the rear spindles on and get the rear emergency brakes installed. But until then, see you around.